Alright, hey guys, Prof here. I want to start making some short videos about PoE 2 now that I've had, a little over 2 weeks with the early access, and people have been asking me to do this for a while, so I figured I might as well start. So, the only way I know how to talk about things is the same thing I do for my classes, which are these sort of like short PowerPoint lectures, and that's what I'm going to do for this, because I think that's just really effective, and you don't want to be here all day. So, as a quick heads up, there's a lot of things that are really great about PoE 2, and I've been having a blast playing it. I've put way too many hours into it, but my profession is philosophy. It's what I got my doctorate in, and so I'm trained to be a critic. So I'm here to critique a thing that I haven't really heard people talk about, because there's plenty of people who are complaining about the game or praising it. I want to talk about something a little bit more specific and nuanced that I think has overarching complications for the game as it goes forward. So this is my little short presentation on the Gemling Legionnaire. Why I think right now it is the best ascendancy for the worst reasons. So a couple things that I want to sort of flag here. This is my thesis statement. I think that Gemling is the best ascendancy in early access because it's the most flexible, and arguably it can perform as well or better than other ascendancies utilizing the same builds. And the reason that I think it's the best for the worst reason is because what Gemling offers is the ability to circumvent some of the frustrating points of friction that exist in Path of Exile as it stands right now. Now, there's plenty of points of friction that Gemling doesn't get around, but I spent most of early access playing Warrior, and then I switched over to playing Gemling, and I'm starting to see some of these things pop up that kind of annoy me because of what I've had to go through playing Warrior in early access. So, to be clear, the things I want to talk about I think are some things that Gemling does that fundamentally aren't going to change about the game, and if that's the case, then I think this is a huge problem. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean these frustrating points of friction? Well, one of the things that people have pointed out is that the attribute requirements currently are very punishing in Path of Exile 2. And those attribute requirements are going to what dictate your character's choices. They're going to dictate what gear you wear, the skill gems you equip, how many support gems of what types you can put on. And once you've got all those skills, mana is a huge issue. Recovering mana can be very difficult for a lot of classes, depending on the skills they're using, or the content that they're running, because you have to keep hitting your mana flask, and it runs out, and then your character doesn't do very much. Now, Leech has been ameliorated a little bit, so it's a little bit better to Leech, but there still are mana cost problems. And another thing that I've heard some people gripe about is sort of inconsistency for some skills. Namely, they might provide some effect, but they only do so some percentage of the time, which means it feels inconsistent to use them. A good example of this on Warrior is Stampede. A very popular Titan build presently is Bleed Stampede. And one element of it is the Aftershock, but that's something that comes from quality on the gem that gives it more of a chance. And even if you were to spec into all the chances on the tree and use all the skill gems, it still wouldn't feel very consistent. And this is probably true for other skills as well. And this is something that Gemling gets around, but we'll get to that in a second. The biggest thing is the attributes. So let's talk about attributes, right? Attributes in this game, very simple and straightforward for those of you who don't know. Every point of strength gets you 2 life, every point of dexterity gets you 5 accuracy, and every point of intelligence gets you 2 mana. These attribute bonuses are not balanced, in the sense that they're not all equally powerful, and they're not all equally valuable. Life is basically always going to be valuable, especially because there's no life on the tree anymore. And before you at me, I know there are some small percentage life or flat life nodes on the tree. There's 4, okay? So strength is very valuable when there's no life on the tree. Dexterity is important for characters, unless they're running Resolute Technique, but not all classes need accuracy, right? So the accuracy is only so important. And as a result, getting a lot of dexterity to use certain gems or wield certain pieces of gear might not feel that great. And intelligence, arguably in a better place because mana does matter. As I said, mana costs can be very punishing in this game. So having a bunch of int isn't necessarily a bad thing, but again, it still doesn't compete with strength. So you really would want to have as much strength as you could get in a lot of cases, because most characters are going to care about life, with the exception of your CI characters. So why am I taking all this time to talk about those attributes? Well, the Gemling cares a lot about attributes, and about quality on skills, and about mana costs. These are all things that are baked into the Ascendency. So I just want to go through some of these really quick. We'll do top to bottom and cover what these offer, and then I'll explain why I think this makes it the best Ascendancy for the worst reasons. First, quality of skills. That's very important for some skills to be consistent. As I said earlier, Stampede gets more aftershock chance, as a good example. Molten Blast has the chance for fire exposure, so you're more likely to just get it the first time you use it. Shockwave totems get reduced base attack speed. They start out at 3 seconds. It's very long, but quality brings that down drastically so that your attack speed feels really good. Now, I know these are all warrior examples, but that's what I've been playing. You can probably think of other skills that you've used in other classes where quality is really important. So this adds consistency, good quality of life for your skills. Implanted gems, meh, it seems like a placeholder to me. +1 level of all skills is certainly useful, but it kind of isn't interesting. It kind of goes against what GGG has said they want to do with Ascendencies in PoE 2, which is make them unique and interesting rather than just having more multipliers for damage of certain types. Advanced Thaumaturgy, 30% less cost of skills, and skill gems have 30% more attribute requirements. The more attribute requirements doesn't actually matter, we'll get to that in a second, but 30% less cost of skills is huge. That's almost as much as Inspiration support, which is 40% less cost. And you could stack the two together if you want to have a gem that's level 38 or something, so that you can actually make the mana cost more manageable. This is a huge quality of life thing. Again, not super interesting, but it does make sense in PoE 2 because mana costs are so high. So it's a bit of power. Integrated Efficiency gives you 3 additional skill slots. I personally haven't run into the problem really of not having enough skill slots, although I could see if you have a lot of spirit, you want to run a lot of auras, that you might have certain skill combinations you want to play, or if you're weapon swapping, it could be really taxing. So 3 additional skill slots, really great, adds more flexibility. Gem Studded, using 2 copies of the same support gem is very powerful, but it's also just very quality of life improvement stuff. Like, there are often multiple skills that you'd like to have more area of effect on. You only get one though, so you better pick the one you like. It's not really about the damage multipliers, although those do exist. You could just have martial tempo on 2 skills so they are faster to use. But it just lets the character play more smoothly if you have more of those quality of life things. What if you have multiple buffs you want to keep up? Well, they can both have more skill effect duration, so it's not as annoying to keep re-hitting your buffs. Little things like that, right? You then got Gem Studded, just talked about. Thaumaturgical Infusion. I don't have much to say about this one, although I will give a special shout out for Cloak of Flame. This will probably become more powerful as more uniques get implemented, or if there are more stats or more passives that care about max resistance. But right now, wearing a Cloak of Flame, the Gemling can get quite a lot of max fire resistance, and Cloak of Flame converts physical damage to fire, so having max fire res is really important. This one seems fine, seems powerful in the right sort of build. Those are all great. But really, it's these last 2 that irk me. Adaptive capability and enhanced effectiveness. These are the big ones. First, attribute requirements of gems can be satisfied by your highest attribute. Adaptive capability removes one of the biggest points of friction in PoE 2, which is the difficulty of using different skills. If you are a strength-based character or a dex-based character or an int-based character, you're going to use skills of that class, and you might want to splash for other skills that would be useful, but you can't, because the attributes are tough. If you want a skill with a high dex requirement, but you don't need the accuracy, it feels kind of bad to pick up a bunch of dexterity. If you're going blood magic and you want to use an int skill, well, you're going to have to use a lot of int even though you don't have any mana. So that feels bad. Gemling doesn't have to care about that. They can just get as much of whatever attribute that they want, and they can use any skills that they want. I wanted to use a curse on my warrior, for example, but there was no way I was going to have enough intelligence to use a curse in my build. Gemling just gets to do that. They can stack strength as high as they want and use curses. And they can use any support gems that they want. I don't inherently think there's a problem with balancing the game around making those choices, but Gemling's power, the power that Gemling has, is that it doesn't have to worry about any of that crap. It just gets to do what it wants to do. It's just flexible. It removes all of that friction. And then finally, we have enhanced effectiveness. Inherent bonuses from intelligence, strength, and dex are doubled. Full disclosure, I started as a Titan. This ascendancy point is what hulking form wishes it was. Hulking form is the Titan node that gives 50% increased effectiveness of small passives. Very unique, very interesting. Lets you really maximize certain statistics that you want to. The problem is, those travel nodes, the attribute nodes on the tree, those don't count. Those are different. Those aren't small passive nodes. So Gemling gets double the effect of those by pathing all over the tree to go to the things that they want to, which gives them either more life, if that's what they care about, more dex, if they want to spec into some of the nodes that care about your accuracy rating or dexterity. There's two really strong ones on the tree that give you more attack speed. Again, quality of life and damage. And if they want to play, heck, they want to play a mana stacking character, they can do that too. Oh, and they can use strength-based skills if they want a mana stack, or dex-based skills. They can do whatever the heck they want, and they're going to do it better than a lot of characters because they have to travel all over the tree to do those things, but they're rewarded for it doubly because all the stats are better on them. Now, why is this a problem? The problem is, attributes are really hard for characters right now, and part of the reason for that is because there's just things that don't exist in PoE 2 that do in PoE 1. Think about the PoE 1 passive tree. In addition to life, which you could get, there are also resistances. Why does that matter? Because of affix pressure. You either get resistances or stats, most of the time, as a suffix on your gear. And if there's no way to get resistances, then you're going to be forced to get as much resistance on your gear as possible, and you can't get any stats. There's also not any of those big 30-point attribute nodes that are off-class, if you will, right? In the Marauder starting area, you've got strength and dex nodes that you can pick up to help you meet your attribute requirements. There are some big passive nodes on the tree, but there's one of each, and they're in the area that those classes are in. The strong get stronger, the smart get smarter, and the dexterous get more dextery. I don't know. Right? The idea is just, it's really hard to get stats on the tree. You can get a couple near the start, but it's just not enough. And Gemling doesn't have to worry about any of that. He just gets to do what he wants to do. So, what's the problem I'm really getting at? Why is this all my whole thesis statement? Why does this all come home to roost? GGG wants Ascendencies to provide unique effects instead of just damage, and that's great. I'm all about that. Even though Titan does just have a 40% more damage node that's conditional, but we'll ignore that for now. But Gemling's unique effects are just things that ignore the restrictive and frustrating mechanics that players have to interact with, and that's bad. Sure, you might still have to pick some attributes up to use certain types of gear, if that's what you're doing, but overall, everything the Gemling has, the reduced mana costs, the quality on skill gems to let them be better at doing what they already do, or do those things more consistently, and the ability to take flexible choices for everything that they want, that's very powerful. But I think it's bad design. Because for that to be a powerful ascendancy, it has to be the case that no one else can do that. And I really don't think PoE 2 should be in a position where you want to restrict players so much that taking an ascendancy that lets you ignore those restrictions and experiment with the game, experiment with all the interesting interactions and mechanics and skills, which is kind of what Path of Exile is known for. It seems bad to have one ascendancy get to do that more easily than everybody else to a great extent. And the only reason that it is that good is because everyone else suffers. Now, you may not agree with me, but that's my argument. So hopefully I'll get some comments. You can let me know what you think and if you disagree. But I really think this is a huge problem right now. And that going forward, there's going to have to be some redesign if we want this game to feel good without being too restrictive. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers.